welcome to episode 62 of the Tyre Recycling podcasts. This episode is going to be slightly different. We're in a run-up to the general election, and we're going to take a look at the policies in the manifestos of the various political parties taking part in the UK election. But before we do that, if you like keeping up to date with the news and views from the tyre and rubber recycling sector, don't forget to subscribe to Tyre and Rubber Recycling or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, X, WhatsApp, and LinkedIn, of course. Well, this podcast is a little different. It's election time in the UK, and we thought that we would take a look at the various parties and how they are considering waste management in their manifestos. This may be a short podcast, I suspect. The UK produces somewhere around 27 million tonnes of waste every year, of which 44% is recycled. That raises a huge question as to what happens with the 56% that does not get recycled. How can we not recycle over half of what we produce as waste? That surely has to be a question for any party coming into government to have a policy on. But there's more. Of that 46% that gets recycled, much of it gets exported. Some 650,000 tonnes as refuse-derived fuel, almost all of it going to Europe according to government statistics. This is a point we will come back to when we look at the manifestos. For the record, we also export some 600,000 tonnes of waste plastic, much of it going to Malaysia, and almost half our tyre risings, some 300,000 tonnes, go to the Indian subcontinent where the authorities are struggling with illegal and low-grade pyrolysis plants that would not meet UK or European standards. A clear breach of the Basel Convention to which the UK has signed up for. But that is a topic for another podcast, perhaps. Firstly, we are going to ask the Tyre Recovery Association's Peter Taylor what his hopes are for the post-election actions that we might want to see in the UK. Peter, with the general election coming up, what are your hopes and expectations for strategies on recycling after the election?
Ewan, I think the first thing we have to do is think about governance as opposed to just our own, I guess as government would see it, our own parochial interests, however important they are to us. But we need more from government than we've been getting. And that's not just true of the tyre industry. It's also true of other important waste streams that we have a dialogue with from time to time. But we need a much better approach from government on tyre and waste recycling generally. It needs to be it's myopic, whereas it needs to be holistic. And DEFRA in particular just don't seem to have understood that. What government needs to do, and this is elections, new governments, it's always an opportunity to rethink things, hopefully do better. But government needs to try harder to understand the needs of business generally, particularly in the recycling sector. Because if they don't, sectors like ours are not going to grow and they're not going to develop. There's too much blue sky thinking, too much thinking about next month, next year, not enough recognition of the needs of the moment, the needs of now. Because unless you solve the problems of the moment, this forward thinking is irrelevant, because the market is under immediate pressure, and those pressures have to be addressed first. No good thinking about the future when you haven't solved the issues of the present. So action, please, not yet more platitudes. We don't need any more of those.
Okay, that's concise and just what we need. I've been doing some digging, and the waste issue is horrendous. We're only recycling 44% of what we produce. So the rest of it is essentially going to landfill. And of the 44%, of that 44%, a huge amount gets exported.
Well, we're not sending stuff to landfill, but not tyres, though other waste streams certainly do.
Yeah.
But from a narrow perspective, and I no doubt government sees it as a very narrow perspective, but it's incredibly important to us if we are to survive into the future, and if government is to meet its own much vaunted circular economy ambitions. How you achieve those without focusing on the issues that businesses like ours face every day, I'm not sure. But perhaps some new administration will finally understand that. But from our perspective, there are three things we want government to do, and two of them we've been asking for several years now. The first is to finally stick to their promises and end the current T8 regime. The second is to follow Australia's actually really quite successful lead and prohibit the export of whole tyres, specifically whole bale tyres. And the third, and that's been brought upon us by the EU's own actually rather forward-looking moves to achieve export recycling equivalents in export markets. And if we don't follow in lockstep with these new EU regulatory moves, then we could be seriously impacted by the fallout from that. And that would just be pure negligence. We would become the back door. While we say it another way, while Europe is tidying up its act, we will then become the back door to poor practice or poorer practice. I mean, surely no one wants that.
You would have thought they wouldn't have wanted that. But then, do they actually think?
Well, there you are. There's a provocative question. But look, we have digital waste tracking coming down the line. Now, what is that going to achieve? Is that going to validate all those exports to end-of-life tyre exports to India and the like, or the Indian subcontinent? In which case they'll need an army of officialdom standing at the quayside in Southampton, Immingham, and the likes, Felixstowe. Surely not. Surely not. And also, we're looking forward at some point in the very near future to the registration of dealers, brokers, and carriers, which is a piece of EA legislation. Don't have a time frame for that yet, but it's potentially valuable, but so thin on detail and time frame that one really wonders when and how it's going to happen. Again, actions, not words, because it's actions that deliver real outcomes, not endless obfuscation from officialdom and from ministers. And I'm sorry to have to be as blunt as that, but that is what it amounts to.
So there are the hopes and expectations from Peter Taylor. But what have the manifestos got to say about waste? I said that I expected this to be a short episode, and in perusing the various published manifestos, only two parties make any sort of reference to waste. Only one has a specific declaration on waste right at the start of its manifesto, but we will come to that. Somewhat worryingly, the Labour Party makes no reference to waste, though it does talk about renewable energy in its grand plan for GB energy. We have previously written to the Labour Party environment spokesman but had no response. To be fair, none of the parties approached responded, though we did, through my own MP Mark Eastwood, get a written response from the Under-Secretary of State for the Environment, making it clear that the government was committed to ending the T8 exemption. It was a question of finding parliamentary time. With the election around the corner, that is a can that will be kicked further down the road again. The Conservative Party manifesto does have some strategy on waste. Remember that refuse-derived fuel? Well, the Conservative Party has stated, and I quote, "We will prevent new waste incinerators being built, including those with recent permit approvals, revoking those where substantial construction has not taken place. This recognises the impact on local communities and that increased recycling rates will reduce the need for incineration capacity in the longer term. So they will stop further RDF use in the UK in a response to a higher recycling rate, yet they make no suggestion as how we are going to increase recycling rates to replace that RDF market. They seem to be making an empty promise to attract the votes of the NIMBY brigade without offering any solution as to what we would do with the waste. How do they propose to bring about that improved recycling rate other than by allowing continued waste exports to a market that may well be about to be closed to them by the EU legislation on the transshipment of waste? However, credit to them, they have actually put something about waste on the table. The Liberal Democrats have nothing. Some green energy thoughts, and that's about it. No mention of waste issue at all. Now then, the Greens. Surely the Greens would have something to say about our enormous waste challenges. Surely they would have a strategy to help deal with waste. They cannot have us exporting our waste to markets where it would not be treated to UK environmental standards. You would have thought so, but no. Not a dicky bird, nothing, zilch, nada. The Reform Party is making a lot of noise. Well, the media is making a lot of noise on its behalf. Their manifesto is pretty thin and focuses on the monsters under the bed, as always. Immigration, benefits, and making Britain great again. At least they would not be breaking too many promises if they got elected, because they have not made any. At this point, none of the other parties have produced a manifesto for the election. But looking at past documents, waste is simply not on their radar. To be fair to Plaid Cymru and the SNP and the Irish parties, little of what they would offer would have any impact on UK legislation. In fact, Scotland has already acted on waste tyres. It removed the T8 overnight, and it has a pre-notification for export of waste. This needs to be accompanied by an Annex 7 and evidence to support the validity of that Annex 7. Great stuff. But the border between Scotland and England is merely geographical rather than economic, and waste gets shipped into England and out of English ports without any notification to the Scottish Environment Protection Agency. The reality is that when you and I go out and put our waste in the bin, we forget about it. It is out of sight and out of mind, unless you have a landfill in your neighbourhood. Unfortunately, the government and the parties that may make up the government does exactly the same thing on a massive scale. They have a black bin that takes 50%, 56% of the waste, and a green bin that takes 44% of the waste. But that 44% is often not treated as it ought to be. I said at the start that only two parties mentioned waste. The Conservatives was the first. The second was a monster raving loony party who made dealing with plastic waste their #1 policy. So there we have it. If we thought that waste was going to come onto any political radar anytime soon, we were thinking wrong. Well, thanks for that, and we'll see you in episode 63.